In the first scene, a girl reads a passage from a book about a battle between a demon lord and a mage. In the passage, the demon lord is shocked that the mage doesn't back down no matter what happens during the fight. The mage explains that he has people to protect, and that thought gives him strength to keep going. He then strikes the demon lord with lightning, delivering a final blow that defeats him and ends their hard-fought battle. After finishing the book, the girl lets out a satisfied sigh. The next scene features Rumia, walking through Alazo town as a student at Alazo Magic Academy. She sees a man who has just injured himself and rushes to help him. After she uses magic to heal his injury, the man notices her school badge and praises her impressive magic skills. However, she tells him to keep it a secret because using magic outside the academy is forbidden. While she chats with him, her friend Sistine comes looking for her, and they head to school together. As they enter the school, they are startled to see a guy running toward them at full speed. Without thinking, Sistine casts a spell that sends him flying into a nearby fountain. When they see him splash into the water, they start to worry they might have gone too far, but to their relief, he surfaces unharmed. They quickly apologize for what happened, but he arrogantly insists they are entirely to blame, ignoring that he provoked them by charging at them. He then makes an inappropriate move on Rumia, as if checking for reasons to accept their apology, which angers Sistine, prompting her to throw him into the fountain again. While the three of them have their encounter at the fountain, Hallie-kun sits in the headmaster's office, waiting impatiently for the guy in the fountain, whose name is Glenn Radars. Glenn is a new teacher at the academy who was supposed to show up earlier, but no one could reach him at the time. Hallie laments that, although Glenn is a temporary replacement for the former teacher, Huey, they shouldn't have hired him. As the students ponder their new teacher's tardiness, he suddenly arrives. Sistine and Rumia are shocked to discover that their new teacher is actually the same guy they clashed with earlier that day. Back in the headmaster's office, Hallie-kun continues to discuss Glenn's qualifications to teach at the academy. They see from his credentials that he's just an average, third-grade mage, but they also recall that he was recommended by a well-respected professor, Arphonia. Hallie-kun starts to speak poorly of Glenn when Arphonia walks in and demands he take back what he just said. The headmaster asks her why she supports Glenn so much, and she replies that it's a long, sad story, adding that she just hopes he has a fulfilling life. Meanwhile, the students in Glenn's class are unhappy with his teaching. Sistine confronts him about his incompetence, but just as she does, the school bell rings, signaling the start of a new class. This gives Glenn the chance to quickly leave while she's speaking. The students head to a changing room to get ready for the next class. While they're busy changing, they're all startled when Glenn walks into the room full of naked girls, and Glenn gets beaten again and tossed out of the room. After this incident, their alchemy class gets cancelled, so the girls decide to have lunch and wait for their next class. While they're having their lunch and chatting, Glenn comes in and sits with them, discussing the food with Rumia. Noticing that Sistine is quiet, he asks her to share her issues with him. Just as she's about to speak, he shoves a spoonful of his food into her mouth, making her furious all over again. In the next class, Glenn keeps up his uninterested attitude towards teaching. Sistine can't take it anymore, so she challenges him to a magic duel, which he accepts. They agree that they'll only use the shock bolt spell to start the duel. This sparks excitement among the other students as they wonder who's more likely to win. They figure that whoever can shorten the shock bolt spell and cast it faster will win. Sistine feels scared and isn't sure if she can win, but she decides that her fight is for a noble cause, and she has to stand her ground and fight because she can't tolerate her teacher's behavior anymore. To everyone's surprise, the teacher takes a hit early in the duel, and after 2 more strikes, he loses to Sistine. Therefore, Sistine demands that he act like a proper teacher from now on. He responds by saying he'll just cut her some slack going forward. Glenn is firm about his teaching approach. In one of his classes, a student asks a question he can't answer, and Sistine offers to take a shot at it, saying Glenn has no appreciation for magic. Glenn pushes back, questioning the value of magic, and mindlessly claims it has no real essence. People just admire it for no reason, and it's only useful for killing. He argues that while one could kill someone with their bare hands, magic allows you to kill 10. Supporting his argument, he mentions that many recorded murder cases involve magic. This rant earns him a slap from Sistine, who broke down in tears listening to him and acted out of frustration. Embarrassed and upset, she runs out of the classroom. Glenn takes a walk to think about what happened with Sistine. During his walk, he finds Rumia trying to activate a magic circle and heads over to her. When he reaches her, he points out that she shouldn't be trying to activate that magic circle. Rumia apologizes and attempts to clean it up, but Glenn encourages her to continue, and he helps her. Afterward, they chat a bit about their pasts. Rumia shares her passion for magic, explaining that she believes it will help her make a positive impact on humanity. She also mentions that magic will allow her to keep her promise to Sistine, whose family used magic to rescue her from a group of evil mages that tried to capture and kill her. She adds that Sistine's family inspired her to learn magic, and urges Glenn to apologize to Sistine, because magic creates a special bond between her and her grandfather. Sistine overhears their conversation, and recalls her father on his deathbed. He was a mage who died before he could uncover the mysteries of Melgalius's sky castle. The next day, Glenn surprises everyone by showing up early. He even apologizes to Sistine and goes on to teach the class in depth about the shock bolt spell they previously thought he couldn't handle. They are shocked to learn there's so much they don't know about magic, so Glenn enlightens them and encourages creativity over mere memorization to become better mages. Word of Glenn's unexpected improvement spreads. Arphonia brags about him to the headmaster, much to Hallie, Kuhn's annoyance. A couple of underdogs known as the Researchers of Divine Wisdom discuss Glenn's progress in secret, planning an evil mission during the Academy's magic conference. The next morning, two mean-looking men break into the class, looking for Rumia. Everyone claims not to know Rumia, and Sistine even confronts them for being rude in their search. After several threats, Rumia reveals herself, and the men admit they knew who she was, but wanted to keep asking until she showed herself. They then grab her and Sistine. One man takes Sistine to a dark corner and tries to assault her when Glenn arrives. Assuming they were just kissing, he heads for the door, but before he can leave, Sistine cries out for him to save her from her assailant. As he approaches, she warns him to run away, saying he might not stand a chance against the attacker. Confused, Glenn asks if she wants him to rescue her or run. He chooses to save her and casts the Fool's Card, a spell that nullifies magic, so neither of them can use magic on each other. He then fights the assailant using his fists. The attacker is surprised by Glenn's strength, even without magic. In the end, Glenn beats him, ties him up, and locks him in a cell to be questioned about the attack on the Academy. Glenn just finished dealing with Sistine's attacker and wants to check if she's okay. She replies that she is fine and is about to say something else when he interrupts, assuming she wants to tell him he shouldn't teach others. Instead, Sistine points out that she actually wanted to mention his pants are down. He notices a tattoo on the man that reveals the attackers belong to a secret society of evil mages, known as the Researchers of Divine Wisdom. He contacts Arphonia through his bracelet, and they both express shock that the terrorists dared to break into the Academy, suspecting an accomplice helped them get inside. As they investigate, a portal opens next to Glenn and Sistine, unleashing a swarm of monsters called bone golems. Sistine and Glenn team up to fight them off. During the battle, Glenn teaches Sistine to use her magic more effectively, then amplifies her magic, triggering an extinction spell that wipes out all the bone golems. Just after that, Rake, another evil mage, appears to attack them. Glenn asks Sistine for help again, this time to use a dispelling spell. Before she can agree, he suddenly pushes her off the building. When she hits the ground, she's initially annoyed, concluding he thinks she's useless. But she reconsiders and realizes that if he really wanted to get rid of her, he wouldn't have asked for her help first. She decides the push was a distraction and rushes back to the fight, arriving just in time to help Glenn with the dispelling force he needed, while he grabs one and stabs it into Rake's heart, killing him. Glenn drains a lot of strength in the fight and loses consciousness. Sistine stays by him until he regains his strength. Once he recovers, Glenn contacts Cecilia to confirm Rumia's location, which is at the teleportation link in the school tower. He heads to the teleportation tower, where he discovers the former teacher, Huey, is behind the attacks on the school. Huey plans to use himself as a human bomb to destroy the school, with Rumia as a crucial component of his plan. He activates the operation using a spell cage, and even though Glenn tries to fight back using a Fool's Card, Huey warns him that he won't have enough time to rescue Rumia if he uses the card. So Glenn decides to use his magical virtue, mana, to write modifying spells on the magic circle to free Rumia from her spell cage. Huey informs him that there are 5 spell cages, far more than Glenn expected, and he might not have enough mana to set Rumia free in time. After neutralizing the 4th spell cage, Glenn realizes he's running out of strength and passes out while trying to help her. Luckily, he collapses near the edge of the spell cage, close enough for Rumia to reach him. She transfers some of her virtue to him, reviving him so he can cancel the spell. Once he finishes, he confronts Huey and beats him up to teach him a lesson for the crimes he committed. Zelos, an Imperial guard, talks with the Imperial maid and shares his worries that Her Majesty, the Queen, plans to go to the Alonzo Empire despite a recent terrorist incident. The maid reminds him that the incident involved Rumia, who is actually Princess Ermiana, and that the Queen is concerned for the princess's safety. They are called into the Queen's presence, and Zelos vows to protect her as they set off on this uncertain journey, even during the competition. He asks to confirm the identity of the girl in question, and the Queen confirms that the girl he means is Princess Ermiana, who was declared dead, and only a few at the Academy know this. Zelos advises the Queen to be careful not to reveal Rumia's identity as Princess Ermiana, to which the Queen acknowledges she's already aware. Zelos apologizes for giving unsolicited advice. The Queen thinks about Rumia and how sad it has been over the past 3 years since she last saw her. Deep down, she feels Rumia hates her and and doubts she will ever be forgiven. But more than anything, she hopes Rumia is healthy wherever she is. In class, Sistine and Rumia announce the categories for the upcoming competition to encourage students to join. However, none seem interested, which worries Sistine since the competition is happening next week. Despite Rumia encouraging them to do their best, the other students are convinced they'll fail no matter what. They also mention that the queen will attend, and they think it would be embarrassing to participate and perform poorly. As they debate participating, Glenn walks in, claiming he can fix things. The girls brush this off, already thinking he always messes things up. He explains that he'll use his charm as their instructor to help them win. He then splits them into groups based on the categories for the competition. Some students disagree, wanting to participate in different categories. Glenn tells them they aren't suited for those categories, and insists that the ones he chose match their abilities better. Hearing this, they listen to him and agree to stick with the categories he assigned. While he continues pairing them up, Sistine and Rumia realize that he must have been paying attention to them all along, despite his indifferent attitude. What they don't know is that Glenn already met with the headmaster earlier in his office, where he mentioned he was broke and needed an advance on his pay. The headmaster replied that the quickest way to get paid would be to earn a special bonus that would go to the teacher whose class won the competition. Gibu, one of the students, suggests a different approach that he thinks might give their class a better chance at winning. He argues that only the top students should participate instead of pairing everyone together. Glenn considers this, but Sistine interrupts, saying it's better to have everyone involved and everyone doing what they're best at, even if it means they might fail. Glenn sits alone, frustrated that he has to work with all his students, while others only focus on the best ones. He regretfully watches as other classes train skillfully for the competition, and then tries to secure a practice space for his class. At the practice ground, Hallie confronts him, demanding he clear the area so his class can use it. Glenn asks if he can at least practice under a tree with his students, but Hallie refuses. Annoyed, Glenn warns Hallie not to underestimate his class, and challenges him to a bet. The losing teacher must give the winning teacher 3 months' salary. As soon as he makes the challenge, Glenn feels a pang of regret because he worries his class might lose. Nonetheless, Hallie agrees to the bet, and they both decide to outdo one another. Days pass, and Glenn puts in a lot of effort to prepare his students for the competition. His students, especially Sistine and Rumia, notice his commitment, since he's usually distant but becomes serious for the competition. One night, Rumia looks at her locket and remembers the time when she was attacked as a child. While she's staring at it, Sistine enters to let her know dinner is ready and asks what she's looking at, but Rumia brushes it off, saying it's nothing and puts the locket away. At the dinner table, Sistine's parents apologize to the girls, explaining they tried to cancel work to watch them compete, but ended up with another job and couldn't make it. The girls respond that they understand, and not to worry about it. On the day of the competition, the queen arrives at the Empire. While traveling, her maid suggests a different pendant for the queen to wear because the one she has might reveal too much about Rumia's identity. The competition begins as scheduled. Rumia notices the pendant on the queen's neck. Class 2, Glenn's class, wins the first round, much to Cecilia's delight and Hallie's annoyance. Meanwhile, Hallie secretly schemes with a guard. In the second round, Class 2 wins again. During the third round, which involves mental defense, Rumia competes against Jail from Class 5, a longtime champion who tries to convince her to give up. However, Rumia narrowly defeats him. As the competition continues, the queen watches Rumia, proud of her performance. The commentator cheers for Class 2 for their amazing performance. Meanwhile, some spectators recognize Glenn from before he became a teacher at the academy. One lady wants to confront him to settle old scores, but Albert stops her. She asks if Albert also wants to meet Glenn, and he admits he has a lot he'd like to discuss with Glenn, but their priority is the mission to protect the queen, especially with some suspicious activities going on. During a short break, Glenn takes a walk when Lynn, a student from his class, approaches him for help. She shares her fear of not doing well in the category he assigned her. He asks if she'd like to switch with someone, particularly in the transmutation category, and she agrees. However, she worries that if she swaps, her new partner might not be ready for the change, which could slow everyone down. Glenn assures her that what matters is enjoying the competition because it's not just a contest, it's also a magical festival. He then gives her a special lesson on self-illusion magic and transforms into Rumia to illustrate how it works. While still in Rumia's form, Sistine brings him lunch, thinking it's Rumia. Feeling very hungry, he takes a slice but doesn't even bite into it before the real Rumia shows up. Sistine then casts a spell to reveal his true form. Realizing what happened, she launches him into the air, landing him in a nearby bush. Seated in the bush, he thinks about what just occurred. Rumia walks over with the food and offers it to him. Glenn devours the food and thanks Rumia, calling the guy who rejected it earlier a fool. On their way back to the competition, they run into the queen, who came looking for Glenn. He initially replies, without seeing her, that he's busy and can't speak to anyone, but when he turns to see her, he greets her properly. Back at the competition site, Zelos, the Imperial Guard, notices the queen is missing and sends some guards to find her. Cecilia laughs, knowing she helped the queen sneak away to see Glenn using her magic. A maid meets Cecilia while she's laughing and reveals something that makes her gasp. The queen talks to Glenn, reminiscing about his past as a great mage, though sadly he was relieved of his duties in disgrace. Glenn argues that he left on his own and insists the queen shouldn't feel sorry for him or treat him like a lowly person. He asks her why she came to see him without any guards. She approaches Rumia, calls her Ermiana, mentions how tall she's grown, says she missed her, and asks how things are at the Sistine family home. Rumia admits it feels like a dream come true to see the queen again. However, after thinking it over, Rumia acts like she's never met the woman and tells her that she's mistaken. She clarifies that she's not Ermiana, but that her name is Rumia. The queen feels sad watching this and apologizes for the mix-up, saying she only confused her with the late princess. With this, Rumia runs away from them, and the queen heads back to her spot at the competition ground. On her way, she's stopped by a group of soldiers led by Zelos. He informs her that due to a certain issue, they will need to hold her up somewhere for a while. From where he's standing, Albert sees what happens between Zelos and the queen. He informs Rial about what he just witnessed, and together, they come up with a plan to keep an eye on the queen to ensure her safety. Meanwhile, Glenn reflects on what he just saw between the queen and Rumia. His thoughts are interrupted by Sistine, who asks about Rumia, who hasn't returned since she went to bring Glenn some food. Glenn tells her about the encounter between the queen and Rumia, and explains that Rumia probably needs some time alone after the incident. He then mentions that he'll look for her anywhere since he has energy from the sandwiches Rumia had brought him earlier. Glenn finds Rumia sitting under a tree, staring at her locket. She doesn't notice him approaching, so she keeps staring at it while he watches her. Finally, he asks what she's looking at. She tells him it's a locket that has always been with her, but she doesn't know much about it because it doesn't have a picture to tell her who gave it to her or any details about it. She remarks that it's strange she has kept it with her all this time, even though she knows nothing about it. She asks if he knows about her and the queen, and he says he does. Then she asks him what he thinks she should have done in that situation. She goes on to explain that she was born special and that her existence is a serious threat to her family since she could be used as a human bomb against them. She tells him that even though she understands, a part of her is still angry at the queen, her mother, for abandoning her. He then asks her what her true feelings are telling her to do in this situation. She admits that she doesn't really understand her feelings at that moment. Glenn reveals that he used to be a mage in the Imperial Army and, because of his job, he often visited the royal court. He adds that the ruler always wears the same locket that Rumia has. He tells her that the answer to her question has been there all along and she needs to face her feelings instead of running from them. She says she's scared to meet the queen, her mother, and begs Glenn to go with her. On their way to meet the queen, Imperial guards intercept them, trying to arrest Rumia for attempted murder of the queen. Rumia surrenders, and although Glenn tries to resist, he gets hit by one of the guards and passes out. The guards take Rumia to a tree and tie her to it. They tell her to close her eyes and stay still, because if she moves, they'll miss their target and she'll meet a much worse fate. Rumia agrees and shuts her eyes. While her eyes are closed, she hears a commotion and opens them to see the guards knocked out on the floor. When her bindings are removed, she turns to find that Glenn is the one who saved her. She asks him why he would come to save her, knowing she didn't want that. He replies that he did it because Sistine would have angrily scolded him if he abandoned her. He helps her realize that if the queen wanted to execute her, there would have to be a trial first. As they're talking, another group of guards charges in to arrest them. Glenn picks up Rumia and casts a spell to teleport them to safety. They land on top of a roof and keep running, hoping to find the queen and talk to her about everything that has happened. Suddenly, Glenn realizes he can talk to the queen without actually meeting her. He heads to a room and activates his contact bracelet to communicate with Cecilia. However, to his dismay, Cecilia tells him there's nothing she can do or say at that moment. She speaks in code, which he struggles to understand but figures out that something is wrong. He tries to think of a way to meet the queen, remembering that she's always surrounded by a group of soldiers led by Zelos. While he's pondering this, a door opens and two people enter the room. He recognizes them as Albert and Rial. The episode starts with the Imperial maid telling Cecilia something shocking that made her gasp. She revealed that the new pendant she gave the queen to replace the usual locket was cursed, and that the queen's life would be sacrificed for the benefit of the researchers of wisdom. At that moment, Zelos walks in but doesn't intervene. The maid then informs Cecilia that the only way to save the queen is through Glenn, and it must happen at sundawn. Meanwhile, Rumia and Glenn are still fiercely fighting Rial. Glenn is surprised to see the court mages show up. He does his best to protect Rumia, but Rial is relentless. She casts a spell that creates a powerful charging blade and runs towards him to strike. Glenn, unable to dodge or counter, uses a mirroring spell to reflect her magic back at her. Seeing his partner on the ground, Albert approaches Glenn, mentioning that it has been a while since they last saw him. Rial regains consciousness and receives a message from Glenn to soothe her pain from the blow. Rumia is confused and asks who they are. Glenn introduces them. Albert, from the Royal Court Mage Corps Special Forces, is the the executioner number 17, and Ryo is number 7, the chariot. He reassures Rumia that they can both be trusted and that she should relax. They discuss the incident at the competition and how the Imperial Guards are watching the Queen. Albert mentions that they are planning to carry out an operation to kill the former princess. Glenn asks about Cecilia, and Albert tells him she is still at the stand, but isn't involved in any plots and can't do anything about the attack, even though she could easily handle one or two of the offending guards. Glenn is puzzled, trying to figure out why they chose that time to go after Rumia. Albert is also unsure, and Ryo suggests that instead of thinking too much, it's better to act quickly since she has a plan that can help. Glenn asks what the plan is, and she blurts out her usual idea, which involves everyone charging recklessly into the scene. After hearing this, Glenn playfully squeezes her ears and tells her to stop coming up with ridiculous plans all the time. When Rumia sees him do this, she thinks they must be very good friends, but Glenn brushes it off, admitting he's just glad he doesn't have to fight them. He then asks them to help him out, recalling that Cecilia mentioned something about finding a way to the Queen. Albert questions why Glenn would attach significance to her words, since they could have been thoughtless. Glenn explains that Cecilia was executioner number 21 and the best of her time, so in a situation like theirs, she wouldn't just say anything that wasn't a hint to assist them in their mission. Glenn adds that if they ignore Cecilia's hint, things will only worsen at the stand, so it's better to work with the best option available, and they agree. At the competition grounds, the students of Class 2 are panicking because Glenn and Rumia are missing. Albert and Ryo approach the students and introduce themselves, telling them not to worry and explaining that Glenn is in a tough situation that prevents him from joining them. He informs them that even though Glenn can't make it, he has sent them a message. Albert conveys the message, saying he will temporarily take Glenn's place. All Glenn wanted from them was to win the competition. Sistine is about to resist when Ryo touches her hand and begs for her understanding. At that close range, Sistine immediately recognizes who they are and tells the rest of the class to follow Albert's orders, emphasizing that it didn't matter who was in charge. What mattered was their team spirit. She reminds them that if they fail, Glenn will constantly mock them. The students think about how annoying that would be and decide they'd rather do their best to avoid such a situation. The commentator announces the start of the next round of the competition, stating that Class 2 is losing its momentum. Hearing this, Hallie is pleased, especially when he sees that Glenn is absent, believing that Class 2 will fail without him. He urges Seda, his student, to make an effort and ensure they crush Class 2. Seda transforms into a magnificent dragon, scoring very high points. Seeing Seda's achievement makes Nibu anxious about her own performance. While watching Seda with fear, Albert approaches and comforts her, as if sensing her thoughts. He reassures her that he believes she has worked hard on her performance, and reminds her that all she needs to do now is relax, as her best effort is all they need. He tells her that if she does her best and still fails, he will crush anyone who tries to blame her with his iron fists. This comforts her and brings Glenn to mind. Feeling confident, she steps into the competition ring while the crowd cheers, eager to see what she will transform into. She casts a spell that turns her into Turks, a sacred angel. This beautiful performance earns her an even higher score than Seda's. Meanwhile, Glenn and Rumia are still on the run, searching for a way out of their current predicament. Zelos orders the Imperial forces to hurry up and find the princess. He commands them to kill her once they do. The competition reaches its final round, where the teams face off against members of the opposing team. Sistine is the last to compete against a member of Team 1, and Albert promises her a treat if she wins the duel. During the first strike, Sistine takes a hit that encourages Henkel from Class 1 to push harder and defeat her. While she struggles to regain her footing, her teammates cheer her on, reminding her that she promised Glenn through Albert that she'd ensure they win. She stands up, feeling strengthened, and uses the modified spells Glenn had taught them earlier. The force of her spell is too much for Henkel, knocking him to the ground and making Sistine the winner of that round. With a final score of 200 to 195, Class 2 beats Class 1 and emerges as the champions of the competition. They are then called to receive their medals and rewards, with Albert and Ryo making their way to the Queen as the leaders of the winning team. However, they aren't the official leaders, so there's hesitation about granting them the award. To their surprise, Albert and Ryo in front of them transform, revealing their true selves as Glenn and Rumia. They had swapped forms before arriving at the competition ground. The Imperial Guard commands that they capture Glenn and Rumia right away, but Cecilia intervenes with a barrier to protect them from the soldiers. Glenn tells the Queen about the wicked actions of her guard, who had tried to kill Rumia, and urges her to put a stop to it immediately. The guards inform him that Rumia's death is necessary to secure the future of the country, and insist that the Queen should explain that to Glenn. The Queen, speaking, orders that Rumia be executed, claiming it's the right thing to do, and expresses regret about giving birth to her. Rumia is hurt to learn this is her mother's decision, and Glenn is puzzled as to why a mother would want her innocent child to die. He recalls only ever seeing the Queen wear her locket, and notices the pendant she has now is new. He suggests she take it off, but she refuses, making him realize the necklace is cursed. Glenn rushes at the guard while simultaneously yanking the necklace from the Queen's neck, The queen regains her senses as Glenn fights the Imperial soldier. Glenn then explains the conditions tied to the curse of the necklace. It shouldn't be yanked, explained, or subjected to a certain time limit, or the wearer would die. The Imperial Guard asks why the queen didn't die when the necklace was ripped off, and Glenn clarifies that he activated the Fool's card when he reached for the necklace to counter the dark magic surrounding it. He then tells the queen to honestly confess how she feels about her daughter. Struggling to find the right words, the queen rushes to Rumia in tears and hugs her tightly. She expresses her deep regret and relief that her daughter is safe. In another scene, Albert discusses his mission details with Ryo in the Alonso Empire. He mentions that he was sent to investigate the movements of the Imperial Guard, which have started to seem suspicious, and also to look into the backgrounds of everyone around the queen. With that, he confronts the Imperial maid and asks why she tried to kill the princess. She responds that the princess is meant for death and casts a spell to teleport away, escaping Ryo's deadly attack. They note that if the queen's handmaiden is a traitor, then those researching divine wisdom have penetrated deeply into the Empire's core. Glenn is alarmed by this revelation, while Albert and Ryo excuse themselves to strategize countermeasures for any future attacks. The queen prepares to leave and says goodbye to Cecilia, asking her to take good care of Rumia while she's away. While Rumia and Glenn walk home, Rumia asks how he figured out that his mom didn't mean what she said when she was wearing the necklace. He tells her that he knew how much her mother loved her, and that she had hired him 3 years ago to watch over her, which he promised to do. She thanks him for keeping his promise and vows to always be by his side in return. Glenn warns her to be careful about her behavior since their enemies haven't all been defeated. He mentions that he just received 3 months' worth of salary from his bet and gets interrupted as he encounters a surprise party from his students. They happily celebrate to mark the success of a conquest. However, he finds they overspent on the party and throws a fit about it. With that, the episode comes to a close. In the first scene, Glenn and Sistine are training in the park, but Sistine can't handle the intense training anymore. Glenn understands and tells her it's not her fault. She's been really sheltered all her life. After training, Sistine shares her frustrations with Glenn, saying she expected to learn new spells or level up her power. Glenn explains that the training is important because it helps her build her skills for attacking and defending in combat. He insists that if Sistine wants to protect Rumia, she needs to improve her power. Glenn mentions that he will teach her military-grade magic, which freaks her out a bit. Her moment of hesitation signals to Glenn that she'll use the magic well. Sistine bows her head and thanks Glenn for teaching her. The next day at the academy, Glenn is sitting by the waterfall looking worn out. Sistine and Rumia come over, worried about his health, but he downplays it to ease their concern. Suddenly, Rebel charges at Glenn from behind with her gigantic sword. The attack catches him off guard, but luckily, he manages to hold the sword. Riel explains that it's just how they greet comrades in war, something Albert taught her. The group learns that Rel has been transferred to their school. She declares she wants to protect Glenn, but he tells her she should protect Rumia instead. Riel insists on protecting him, so Glenn lifts her up and shakes her playfully like a baby to remind her of her mission. Later, Glenn introduces Riel to the classroom, and at first, everyone is excited by her cuteness. However, her awkwardness dampens the excitement a bit. Someone asks about her family, and it turns out Riel has no family. From the back of the class, another student asks her about her relationship with Glenn, and she boldly claims he is her everything, which surprises everyone. In the next scene, the class practices the magic spell Shock Bolt to destroy a dummy. Sistine excels, destroying the dummy in one shot while her classmates cheer her on. Next up is Rel, who struggles to use Shock Bolt. She asks if she can use another spell, and when Glenn agrees, she uses a different, dangerous spell to destroy the dummy, making everyone in the class fearful of her. After the session, it's break time, and while everyone is in their little groups, Rel sits alone. Rumia and Sistine invite her over, and she reluctantly agrees. She spots a strawberry tart in the cafeteria and eagerly eats it. As she sits there, the class comes closer to her, realizing she might not be so dangerous after all. Later, in the school library, Glenn talks with Celica. He wonders what the military is thinking, sending Rel to the school to protect it, but feels good about it because it'll help her interact with her peers. Afterwards, the boys and girls from Glenn's class are riding in 2 separate carriages. The boys feel a bit down, but Glenn gets them excited by dropping hints about where they're going. They reach a ship port where the students look for things to buy. Glenn runs into Albert, who warns him about Riel, but Glenn insists she's not dangerous anymore. That's in the past. The class boards one of the ships, which takes them to Cineria Island. Glenn has motion sickness, but he decides to hold it in because he's excited about the beach in Cineria and the chance to see the girls in swimsuits. Later, the boys and girls are having fun in their swimsuits while Glenn gives them the opportunity to enjoy themselves. They play and have a great time until it gets dark. At night, the boys plan to sneak into the girls' rooms, but Glenn catches them. He tells them to go back, but the boys refuse and challenge him to a duel. They have fun fighting each other. Just upstairs on the balcony of the girls' rooms, the girls watch as the boys excitedly spar before they go inside to play board games. Glenn easily defeats all the boys. Later, Glenn goes to the beach to clear his mind under the open midnight sky, joined by Revel, Rumia, and Sistine, who run toward the ocean and have fun playing in the water. Glenn remembers Albert's warning, but he can't find any fear when it comes to Ryo. The girls have their fun and then head to bed. Not long after, Glenn leaves the beach to walk back home and encounters Ryo, who wants to talk. Glenn asks her why she left the Imperial Mage Corps. She tells him that without him, she feels life isn't worth living. Glenn wants her to let go of that thought, but Rel gets visibly upset because she wants to protect him, and he keeps refusing her protection. She blames the girls for not wanting her help and runs away crying while Glenn watches. In the next scene, a fire burns as strands go through the flames. Then the scene shifts to a mountain cliff where a creepy woman in a maid's dress says her organization is looking into the matter. The man informs her that preparations for the amplifier have been made, which will help them achieve their goal. The episode begins with Glenn's class walking through a forest. Sistine is worried about Rumia and Rel because they both look exhausted. Riel trips on a tree branch, and Sistine and Rumia rush to help her, but Riel pushes Rumia's hand away, exclaiming that she hates everyone and doesn't want anyone to touch her. Ray walks off, leaving the girls concerned about the sudden outburst of anger. Glenn reassures them, explaining that Raywell is in an unstable state, which is why she's behaving this way. The class arrives at a white research facility, where the professor warmly welcomes them and leads them on a tour. Rumia and Sistine decide to give Rel some space, hoping that a little separation will help her calm down. As the tour continues, the professor talks about white alchemy, describing it as a combination of alchemy and white magic, with the main focus being on life itself. Later, in another room, the professor shows the students strange animals in tubes and explains that experiments are done by mixing various plants and animals to create chimeras. The class excitedly observes these unusual creatures as the tour progresses. Sistine shares with Rumia her aspiration to major in magical archaeology, despite the facility dampening her enthusiasm. Rumia says she wants to pursue magical beauty, believing it's wrong to manipulate life, as it could lead to dark consequences. During their discussion, Rumia mentions a government-funded project called Project Revive Life, but gets interrupted by the professor, who is impressed by her knowledge. He explains that Project Revive Life involves creating a body through alchemy using gene code, which is the code of the individual to be revived. Astral code is used as memories converted into data that serve as ingredients for reviving a human. The girls view this as not a true revival, but merely parts of people made in a lab. The project has some benefits, but it requires sacrificing 3 lives to revive one, which is why research on it has been banned in various centers. There's a rumor that the researchers of Divine Wisdom have stolen and completed this research secretly. Sistine asks the professor if another ingredient is needed, and he replies that the only one not mentioned before is original magic, which makes the process much smoother when wielded by someone. After their discussion, the class heads into town. Sistine uses this opportunity to invite Riel to join them, but Riel quickly declines and runs off. As she wanders through the town, she internally expresses her hatred for Sistine and Rumia, blaming them for taking Glenn away from her. At the same time, in a building downtown, Glenn tells the girls to be patient with Riel because she's just a child, and he goes off to find her since he is her teacher. On the beach, Revel sees her long-lost brother and gets excited while Albert watches from the forest. Albert tries to walk away, but he finds himself trapped in a barrier set by Eleanor's chalet. She promises him a steamy light, but he refuses and attacks her instead. Eleanor easily dodges Albert's attacks, and then, in a crazed voice with ripped clothes, she screams and raises an army of the undead to fight Albert. Albert casts a field of lightning and quickly gets rid of the undead. Eleanor heals her wounds effortlessly and tells Albert he's stronger than she expected. Back at the mansion, Rumina and Sistine discuss earlier events with Rel and wonder what truly motivates her actions. Sistine later tells Rumina she's going shopping for food, as they are both starving. Back at the beach, Riel can't believe her brother is right in front of her. He shares his struggles and how getting rid of Glenn will earn him freedom for their group. Riel is hesitant. While she struggles with her feelings, Glenn arrives and separates her from her brother. Glenn prepares to capture the man with Riel, but she stabs him from behind. Rel kills Glenn and tells his corpse that she lives for her brother. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, Albert and Eleanor keep fighting until Eleanor suddenly leaves. In the next scene, Sistine excitedly returns home with groceries from the market. She walks into her room and is horrified to see Rumina stabbed by Revel. Rel tells Sistine Rumina isn't dead yet and that she has killed Glenn. This upsets Sistine as she struggles to understand it. Rabel declares she is now her enemy and tries to drag Rumina's unconscious body away. Sistine threatens to blast Riel, but Riel isn't scared. Riel challenges Sistine to shoot, but Sistine is paralyzed with fear as Riel picks Rumina up to escape. Sistine cries over her inability to shoot Riel. Just then, Albert carries Glenn's lifeless body into the house. When he turns on the light to examine the body, Sistine screams in horror at Glenn's severe injury. Albert reassures her that Glenn is alive, even if just barely. Sistine can't control herself and breaks down in tears from the emotional pain. Albert tells her that if she wants to save Glenn, she needs to stop crying because they must focus on helping him. Sistine wipes her tears away and asks Albert what she should do. Albert suggests using the white magic ritual, which requires a lot of mana, but he plans to connect with Sistine to tap into her mana too. He instructs her to give Glenn CPR. She hesitates but ultimately follows through while Albert draws magic circles. In a distant place, Rumina wakes up, tied up, her hands shackled and raised above her head. She sees Revel and learns that Revel has killed Glenn. The episode starts with Revel talking to the bound Rumina. She tells her that she didn't want to kill Glenn, but without her brother, she doesn't know what she's living for. Glenn wakes up and finds himself in the girl's room, all bandaged up, with Sistine at the foot of the bed, exhausted from trying to bring him back from the dead. He immediately asks Albert to explain what's going on. Albert reminds Glenn of his earlier warning about Revel, and mentions the network of spies sent to monitor the white alchemy schools. Glenn is furious that Rumina had to be used as bait, telling Albert he can't forgive him for following such orders from his superiors. Albert suggests a ruthless approach, saying he will eliminate Riel if he sees her, but Glenn refuses, insisting he'll change Riel's mindset no matter what, even if he has to force it himself. Albert is surprised Glenn can say that after also betraying his comrades and fleeing, but he forgives him. Glenn thanks Sistine for her kindness while she sleeps, and then he and Albert rush off to save Rumina. Meanwhile, in the villain's lair, Rumina screams in agony as her power is drained by the villain's machine. The leader is thrilled and praises Rel's brother for bringing Rumina to them. Their evil project, Project Revive Life, can now be completed thanks to Rel's brother. The leader is amazed by his ability and tells Rumina she should be grateful because she'll help them with their research. He argues that, while she thinks the researchers of divine wisdom are evil, the royal family is far worse. Eleanor interrupts him, saying they should continue the experiment. In the background, Revel stays quiet, prompting her brother to check on her. As this unfolds, the group notices Glenn and Albert entering their lair and uses magic screens to watch them. The leader isn't worried about them, believing his creatures will easily take care of it. He sends out a chimera lion with wings to attack them, but Albert defeats it in one blow, frustrating the leader since it went down too easily. Albert and Glenn continue their quest to save Rumina, while Albert explains that these creatures are chimeras, long experimented on by the military. The scene briefly shifts to the girls' dorm, where Sistine is awake, wondering if her training has paid off. A group of girls rush into her room, eager but scared to find it messy and stained with blood. Meanwhile, Glenn and Albert face off against a chimera turtle with a crystal shell. It's a bit tougher, but they manage to defeat it easily. The defeat angers the leader, who storms out, vowing to end Glenn's life. The next scene returns to the hotel, where the class interrogates Sistine, but she can't provide much detail besides mentioning that Glenn will bring back Rumina and Rebel. The group wants to go after their teacher out of concern, but Sistine convinces them to trust Glenn's abilities and leave it to him. Glenn and Albert run into the leader of the villains, who has altered his body. Glenn leaves Albert to handle it. Riel is convinced by her brother to fight Glenn, agreeing that it's her reason for living. Glenn bursts into the room and confronts Rel, trying to explain that her brother is dead, but she ignores him and attacks with her weapon, claiming her brother is everything to her. Glenn asks Rel to tell him her brother's name, but she struggles to think and comes up blank. Glenn uses gravity control to pin Revel down, then defeats her brother, who turns out to be a fake, and destroys the machine. Riel starts to regain some of her old memories, and recalls her real brother's name is Sion. She remembers that Sion was a remorseful member of the villain group and was killed in the lab by another member because he had fulfilled his purpose for the group. Glenn tells Reblanc that she was created in those labs using people's lives, and she is a product of the Revive Life research. After this, the fake brother insults her, which angers Glenn, but he can't land any blows. The fake brother reveals his new weapons, different girls who look like Rel but have no emotions. These weapons attack Glenn and start to overwhelm him, but with Riel's help, he defeats the girls. Glenn beats up the fake brother and warns him to stay away from his student. Meanwhile, Albert keeps launching wave after wave of attacks at the group's leader, burning him to dust. The leader can't help but scream in pain as Albert's strength overwhelms him. Eventually, the group returns, and there's a touching moment as the girls cry upon seeing each other. Riel tearfully asks for forgiveness, knowing she hurt her friends. Sistine easily forgives her, happy to see Rel back to normal, and gives her a big hug. Afterward, they head back to the beach, where the kids are playing volleyball. While they're having fun, Glenn sits with Albert, discussing what's most important to them. Glenn feels satisfied that he's fulfilled his wish to protect the innocence and joy of his class as he watches them enjoy themselves. Meanwhile, in a distant place, Eleanor is thrilled as she holds a gem containing the entire Project Revival Life ritual. The group is still at the beach having fun when a ball falls near Glenn. He's invited to join in but says he can't. He tosses the ball back to Sistine, and then Albert mentions that Sistine resembles Sarah Silvers. In the next next scene, Eleanor finds herself in a strange world surrounded by stacks of rocks and a pink sky, with the rocks covered in strange inscriptions. She talks to her grandmaster, asking what to do about those in the organization trying to resurrect Princess Ermania. The grandmaster tells her to handle it as she sees fit, explaining that how each person chooses to live will define their story. Meanwhile, at Sistine's family home, the three girls are having a meal while Sistine's parents are excited to see them. They ask Rella what she thinks of Glenn, and she praises him, saying it all begins and ends with him. Sistine's parents are pleased, thinking Glenn must be a great guy. Rael enjoys her food, eating it excitedly. After dinner, upstairs in the house, the girls are together, and Rael feels bad about her actions. She tries to apologize again, feeling weighed down by the hurt she caused her friends. Sistine hugs her tightly, reassuring her that it's okay because it's in the past. As this happens, Revel starts to cry, and Rumina joins in for a group hug. The next day, Sistine walks through the library carrying heavy books when she bumps into a boy, causing a book to fall. Professor Alphonia picks it up, intrigued because it was written by Sistine's grandfather. Alphonia listens as Sistine shares her desire to continue her grandfather's work. Alphonia tells her a personal thought. Those who achieve something are the fools who keep pushing forward, while those who don't achieve are the wise who stop progressing. After this, Alphonia wishes Sistine good luck and walks away. Sistine runs into Glenn while walking around the library. Glenn asks if she's the one who revived him while he was unconscious, and Sistine blushes, recalling the kiss they shared to bring him back to life. Rumina and Revel enter, and notice Sistine's face is red. Riel misreads the situation, thinking Glenn hurt Sistine, and charges at him with her huge conjured sword, sending Glenn flying out of the library. Once outside on the ground, a carriage approaches, and horses nearly trample him. However, the rider uses a wind spell to lift Glenn off the ground. After Glenn is saved, he gets down from the carriage and starts talking to Sistine, asking who he is, sensing a connection between him and Sistine. The young man introduces himself to Glenn as Leos Kalidos. He's been invited to their academy as a guest instructor, and he claims to be Sistine's fiancé as well. Leos mentions that he and Sistine swore their futures to each other since childhood. Glenn mocks Sistine, but Leos takes it seriously and is offended. Sistine diffuses the tension by telling Leos it's just a joke, and that Glenn isn't serious. Afterwards, Sistine calls Glenn by his name, which piques Leos' interest. Glenn is popular among different magic academies, known as a fast-rising, intelligent teacher who focuses on practical magic rather than theoretical concepts. Leos wants to sit in on one of his lectures. He assures Sistine he's serious about this, and her classmates watch in astonishment. Later, Glenn resumes teasing Sistine, calling her names and claiming she's lucky because of it. This prompts Sistine to retaliate with a magic spell. In the next scene, the school leaders are surprised by the arrival of a high-level professor like Leos, sent to assist them, but Alphonia is skeptical for some reason. Later, Leos teaches a class on enhancing magic quality, saying his lessons will help them increase their magical output. After his lecture, the class applauds him. Glenn observes it, and though he admits the class was well done and educational, he worries that teaching them too much has downsides. Even though they are now more powerful, they don't grasp the potential consequences of their magic. The shock bolt skill they know could kill someone, but the kids only understand that the magic exists. Rumina hears Glenn talking to himself, but reassures him that he taught the class well, so none of his students should be foolish. Glenn mocks Sistine again, who sits on the other side of the class, but she can't respond as Leos approaches to ask her opinion on his lecture. Leos expresses a desire to take a walk with her, and she agrees. Outside, Leos reminisces about how fast time has passed. As they stroll around the academy grounds, they talk about their childhood. They don't notice Glenn, Rumina, and Rel hiding behind the trees and bushes, eavesdropping on their conversation. Leos proposes to Sistine, but she tells him she can't marry him because of a promise she made to her grandfather when she was younger, a promise to uncover the mystery of Melgaliu's sky castle. She wants to achieve that and learn more magic before marriage. Leos, hearing her thoughts, insists it's impossible and meaningless, saying a life spent chasing those things will only bring sadness. He claims her grandfather couldn't reach his potential because he pursued such frivolous things, and asks Sistine to support him in his research on military magic instead, but she refuses again. Their exchange prompts Glenn to step in for Sistine, urging her to follow her path because she is the main character of her own story. Leos demands Glenn stay out of it, saying it's none of his business, but Sistine counters that it is Glenn's business because they've sworn themselves to each other. Glenn gets bold and mentions that they shared a bed the previous night, catching Sistine off guard, prompting her to drag him away. This annoys Leos, who challenges Glenn to a duel. He's excited about the duel because winning would mean he could marry Sistine and live unburdened. He also includes the class in the the duel, saying he'll train them since the competition is based on their skills as magic instructors. The class feels too weak to compete, but Glenn encourages them. In the evening, Glenn is at the bar with Albert. They discuss the earlier events of the day before Albert brings up what he wanted to discuss. Angel's dust has been smuggled into the city, and he doesn't want Glenn to get involved in the investigation. The thought of Angel disturbs both of them, triggering bad memories. Glenn leaves Albert and walks home, recalling Sarah once more. Meanwhile, in a carriage on the other side of town, Leos is conversing with a shady-looking man, assuring him everything is going according to plan. The two classes are briefed on the details of the duel by Hallie. He feels ashamed of Glenn, who is using their Noble Academy training to fight over a woman. Hallie asks Leos to set Glenn straight because he holds him in high regard. Leos agrees, vowing to make Glenn pay. He approaches Sistine and reassures her not to worry, promising to give his all to win her hand. This romantic gesture lifts the spirits of the whole class and stands in stark contrast to Glenn's intention to marry for wealth. Several classmates notice this, and a classmate asks Sistine whom she would like to marry. Sistine secretly prefers Glenn but is too shy to admit it, causing her to retreat and run away. Right after, the duel kicks off with a loud gong signaling the start. Class 4, Leos's class, stands tall at the beginning, striking several members of Class 2, which is Glenn's class. Class 4 is expected to win, and they project confidence with their power and precision, far superior to Class 2. Leos has taught them a solid strategy for modern mage combat known as the three-man cell tactic, a frontline attacker, a frontline defender, and rear support that adapts to the situation while aiding the frontliners from a distance. This approach allows everyone to focus on their specialized roles, boosting their effectiveness. Leos makes his move on the battlefield, deploying more troops than Class 2 in each area to take out each unit. Everyone believes Class 4 should win thanks to their superior magic, numbers, and Leos's exceptional tactics, but Class 2 puts up a surprising fight. Earlier, Glenn had told Class 2 they wouldn't be able to execute the three-man cell tactic, but he had another strategy ready for them. They form two-man cells to counter the three-man cells, and the plan appears to be working. Observing this, Leos instructs his class to create distance and switch to long-range sniping from the hills. However, when he checks in with one of his groups, he finds they've been overpowered by some of Class 2. He tells his group to retreat into the forest, but they encounter Glenn, who sets traps to catch members of Class 4. This sneaky tactic shifts the battle back in Class 2's favor. Witnessing his actions, Sistine feels foolish for liking Glenn while he laughs as Class 4 tries to escape him and his class. Despite the chaos, the battle ends in a draw since it doesn't conclude within the time limit allowed. Glenn congratulates his class for managing to hold their own against Class 4, while Leos criticizes his class for failing to finish off Class 2. Glenn urges Leos to go easy on them, which annoys Leos, leading him to challenge Glenn again. They set their rematch for early the next morning. This altercation bothers Sistine, but what irritates her the most is that Glenn seems to want to marry her just for money. Eventually, Sistine slaps Glenn and leaves as the rest of the class heads to their carriages. In a carriage on the way back, Rumia talks to Sistine and explains that Glenn isn't the type to duel someone just for cash. She encourages Sistine to have a one-on-one conversation with Glenn to understand what drives his actions. The next scene takes place in a dark alley in the city, where Albert and some other men spot a drug addict known as Angel, marking this as the 5th case they've encountered. Not too far away, Leos is fuming because he lost to Glenn, but he's excited about the chance to fight him again the next day, convinced that Glenn doesn't stand a chance in a one-on-one battle. He then reveals his true motive for wanting Sistine's hand in marriage. He wants the main Kleidos family to gain full control over the Branch family and to secure his position as the next family leader. That night, Glenn is making plans for the upcoming fight when Sistine confronts him, asking why he wants this duel. Glenn hesitantly admits the truth. She reminds him of Sarah, an old friend who supported his dream of becoming a mage, but he foolishly let her die. After her death, he gave up on everything, including his dream of being a mage, and ended up isolating himself. Glenn is unsure of his motivation. He thinks he might be hoping for Sistine's success, or trying to make amends for Sarah by protecting Sistine's dream. He's angry because Leos belittled her ambitions and tried to bring her down, and he couldn't hold back his anger. Sistine mentions that there might be some truth to what Leos said about her dream. The more she studies magic, the more she feels she might lose heart. However, if there's at least one person who supports her, she'll keep striving for that dream. Glenn gets a bit cocky and laughs, telling Sistine that it's his job as her teacher to support his students' dreams. Leos barges in and digs up a part of Glenn's past that immediately rattles him. Glenn tells Leos to leave, but he ignores him, saying Glenn doesn't have the right to live in the light the way he does with his guilty conscience. Leos continues, saying Glenn's skills are better suited elsewhere, exposing him as a former member of the Imperial Mage Corps Special Forces, Zero, known as the Fool Glen Raiders. Glenn has had enough and attacks Leos, but Leos quickly overpowers him with skills that resemble those of an Imperial Mage. He also uses a technique called Tulpa, which Sistine recognizes. It allows him to manifest his imagination into reality, creating creating artificial spirits, demons, and gods. The tulpas hit Glenn relentlessly since it's not a spell but a heightened imagination in a trance state. Glenn's skill, Fool's World, can't stop it. Defeated, Glenn walks away. Sistine tries to follow him, but Leos holds her back when she tells him to let her go. He reveals his true nature and acts aggressively towards Sistine, telling her to shut up or he'll make her disappear. This frightens Sistine, but Leos doesn't stop there. He blackmails her with Rumia's true identity and power, trying to coerce her into marrying him. He even threatens to expose Rel's identity, which terrifies Sistine, as she hopes Glenn will come to her rescue. The next day, Glenn doesn't show up for the fight and never returns to class or the academy again. On the balcony in the girls' dorm, Sistine remembers how she was pressured into accepting Leos's proposal. She recalls how he spoke to her in a wicked and disrespectful manner, even going so far as to call her a bitch. The next morning, a classmate worries about Sistine and wonders why she gave up on her dream. She tries to talk to Sistine, but Sistine downplays her dreams, insisting that it is what it is, and she is happy. The classmate keeps trying to engage, but Leos interrupts, asking Sistine to escort him somewhere for a meeting. As they walk away, Rio feels a surge of anger towards Leos but can't understand why. She attempts to confront him but is stopped by Rumia, who asks her to wait a little longer. Rumia had tried to talk to Sistine the night before, wanting to get to the bottom of things, but Sistine insisted she should be left alone, claiming nothing was wrong. Rumia immediately told Glenn everything while crying, but Glenn told her to calm down and leave everything to him before disappearing. She encourages Rael to have faith in Glenn. A week later, it's the day of Sistine's wedding. She is dressed in a beautiful white gown. Sistine reassures her friends not to worry and tells them to relax and find seats for the wedding. After shooing them away, she starts crying, overwhelmed by the thought of marrying Leos. The couple goes to the chapel and goes through the wedding rites, both saying "I do," making them husband and wife. But just as they're about to kiss, Glenn comes to Sistine's rescue. He uses mist to distract everyone and then pulls Sistine away from the cathedral. Glenn tells Sistine he figured out that Leos is blackmailing her, and this was his only way to rescue her since he feels he would have lost the duel if he hadn't fought seriously. So, he devised a plan to help himself stay sharp. Glenn still believes Leos is doing all this because he loves Sistine, but Sistine insists that's not true. She's seen his true colors. Now, addicts high on angel dust are closing in, surrounding everyone, even those in the chapel, who have to flee. Glenn tells Sistine to run as he holds them off. They both escape while the zombie-like creatures keep pursuing her. He remembers Sarah's death and how it parallels their current situation. He suspects Leos is behind this as he fights to save Sistine's life. As they keep running, they encounter Leos again, but the figure reveals he's not really Leos, but the former Imperial Mage Corps Executioner, 11, Justice Jadis Lowen. He dispels the magic and shows his true face. He tells them Leos was killed right after the Mage Corps battle earlier. Glenn urges Sistine to run so he can face Jadis one-on-one. Everything was set up by Jadis to confront Glenn directly. It's a scheme he runs each year to eliminate powerful mages and seize the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records hold the power to rule over the very principles of this world, granting the holder absolute rights. To obtain them, Jadis must defeat the strongest. This isn't about revenge, but a challenge from Jadis to Glenn. Jadis creates imagined creatures to attack Glenn, who tries to defend himself with his magic gun. He hides and uses his weapons and skills to defeat Jadis, but Jadis counters him at every turn, laughing as he overwhelms Glenn with his creatures. They shoot a laser at Glenn, weakening him, but before they can go in for the kill, Sistine uses wind magic to strike Jadis. Glenn asks Sistine why she didn't run away, and she tells him he doesn't belong in a world of killing, but she believes he belongs in their world. Glenn has her form a two-person cell, and they attack Jadis together. Jadis is irritated by Sistine's interference as she helps Glenn, which allows him to overwhelm Jadis immediately, who is caught off guard by Sistine's skill and conjures a massive imaginary being. However, before it fully forms, Sistine shoots at it, giving Glenn another chance to deliver a powerful punch. This punch sends Jadis crashing through walls, causing significant destruction. Afterward, Jadis lies down and admits defeat, acknowledging that it was Sistine's help that allowed Glenn to win. Glenn checks on Sistine, who has exhausted her mana and is breathing heavily. At that moment, Jadis escapes, but warns Glenn that this empire must be destroyed, as it was built with evil intentions. He promises to defeat Glenn when they meet again before disappearing into the sky. As he leaves, Glenn calls him a bastard and shouts for him never to show his face again. Sistine can no longer walk, so Glenn carries her on his back. When they stand, the whole class rushes in, smiling at the sight of them. Glenn asks Sistine if the class will still accept him as their teacher, and she replies that they will. In the next scene, Glenn is with Albert and a few other men, apologizing for letting Jadis get away. Albert tells him it's fine, as he never even asked for Glenn's help with that. Still, Glenn is upset, especially about Jadis's comment regarding the Akashic Records, which supposedly grant the power to control the very principles of the world. The thought of Jadis trying to get his hands on it scares Glenn. Down in the underground labyrinth beneath the city, Eleanor stands beside an enchanted tablet, wondering if the door she seeks is ahead of her. In the morning, Glenn walks through the academy halls happily and runs into a few teachers, playfully teasing some of them. At the end of the hall, he meets Celica, who tells him she plans to fully explore the underground labyrinth because she feels there's something she needs to do there. She asks Glenn to count on him as he heads to class, reminiscing about his past and the things he wants to protect, the things that allow him to rise again and again.